"I'm afraid I'm not enough," she whispered, but the giant cowboy replied, "For me you already are." Have you ever heard a confession so fragile it seemed to break in the air before reaching your heart? Have you ever seen a man scarred by war look at a broken woman and, for an instant, make her believe she was still worthy of love? Before we begin, subscribe to the channel because I've got something very special for you tomorrow. Don't miss it. Before we begin, subscribe because tomorrow you'll hear the story of an impossible pact between a judge and an outlaw, an oath that forever changed the frontier of the West. Tonight in Sage Creek, you'll meet Clara Whitmore, a woman who carries the weight of a shattered marriage, convinced she deserves nothing more than silence. And also Matthew Kane, the giant cowboy who bears the invisible scars of watching his family die in the last raid. He lives with guilt as his only companion. She lives with the fear of never being enough for anyone. Two wounded souls who should never have met, but who, amid dust and violence, discover that maybe love doesn't always heal, though it can ignite where you least expect it. But tell me, you who listen, what would you do if the only person capable of making you feel alive was, at the same time, the only one you could never have? Would you dare give your heart, knowing that fate had already decided to separate you? And right now, before I take you into Clara and Matthew's world, I want you to tell me something in the comments. From what corner of the world are you listening to this story of impossible love? Whether you're in New York or a small town in Texas, London, or somewhere in the heart of Australia, I want to know that this tale of hearts that beat against destiny is reaching you right now. Drop your location in the comments because every place has its own Clara and Matthew, souls who love against all odds. Sage Creek, Montana Territory, September 1884. The storm arrives without warning, as storms often do in frontier country, turning the late afternoon sky the color of old bruises. Lightning splits the darkness, followed by thunder that shakes the wooden buildings of the small town like dice in a cup. Clara Whitmore runs through the rain, her dress already soaked through, her breath coming in desperate gasps. Behind her, somewhere in the storm, the sound of hoofbeats grows closer. Her ex-husband's men, tracking her like hounds track a wounded deer. She stumbles into the first shelter she finds, a barn at the edge of town. The doors swing shut behind her just as another flash of lightning illuminates the world outside. In the sudden darkness, she presses her back against the wooden doors and tries to quiet her breathing, tries to become invisible. That's when she hears the voice, deep as distant thunder, gentle as rain on dry earth. "Ma'am, you're bleeding." Clara spins around, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the dim light filtering through the barn's windows, she sees him. Matthew. Kane stands in the shadows, and even in the darkness, she can tell he's massive. 6'6" at least, with shoulders that could carry the weight of the world. Hands that look like they could break a man in half or cradle a sparrow with equal ease. But it's his eyes that stop her breath, grey as storm clouds, but holding. Something she hasn't seen directed at her in years. Kindness. "I'm sorry," Clara whispers, backing toward the door. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'll go." "You'll do no such thing," Matthew says, stepping into the light. "Storm's getting worse, and you're hurt." He's right. Clara looks down and sees blood seeping through her dress where she scraped herself climbing a fence in her desperate flight. The sight of it makes her dizzy, though whether from blood loss or exhaustion she can't tell. "I'm running from someone," she says, the words tumbling out before she can stop them. "My ex-husband. He's a powerful man in the territory, a landowner. If he finds me here, if he finds you helping me..." Matthew studies her face in the flickering lantern light. Clara knows what he sees. A woman past 30, with auburn hair escaping its pins and green eyes that have seen too much cruelty. A woman who flinches when men raise their voices, who walks like she's always ready to run. "What's your name?" Matthew asks. Clara Whitmore. I'm Matthew Kane. He moves slowly, like someone who knows sudden movements can frighten wounded things, and I've never been much concerned with what powerful men think of me. But Clara can see the doubt in his eyes, can see him weighing the cost of helping her. In a town like Sage Creek, reputation matters, and Matthew Kane, she realizes, is already fighting battles she can't see. You should be concerned, Clara, says her voice breaking. Richard Whitmore owns half the territory. He has judges in his pocket, sheriffs who do his bidding. If he wants me back, if he wants you punished for helping me... She can't finish the sentence, but she doesn't need to. They both know what Richard Whitmore is capable of. The storm outside grows fiercer, and Clara finds herself trapped between the violence of nature and the violence of men. She slides down the barn wall until she's sitting in the hay, her arms wrapped around her knees. I'm so tired, she whispers, and suddenly it all comes pouring out. The years of marriage to a man who saw her as property, the beatings that left, bruises in places no one could see, the slow erosion of her spirit until she became convinced she deserved nothing better. I tried to be a good wife, she says, staring at her hands. I tried to be enough for him, but nothing I did was ever right. Nothing I said was ever what he wanted to hear. And after a while, I started believing him when he said I was worthless, when he said no other man would ever want someone as broken as me. The words hang in the air between them, heavy as the thunder outside. Clara expects Matthew to turn away, to tell her she should go back to her husband, to make some excuse about not wanting trouble. Instead, he kneels in the hay beside her, his massive frame somehow making her feel protected rather than threatened. Ma'am, he says, his voice rough with emotion, I don't know what kind of man could look at you and see anything but beauty. But I know this. You're not worthless, and you're not broken. You're brave enough to run from a man who hurt you, brave enough to seek shelter in a stranger's barn. That takes more courage than most people have in their whole lives. Clara looks up at him, searching his face for lies, for the mockery she's come to expect from men. But all she sees is sincerity, a gentleness that seems impossible in someone so large. I'm afraid, she whispers. I'm afraid I'm not enough. Not enough to deserve kindness. Not enough to deserve love. Not enough to deserve a life that doesn't hurt. Matthew reaches out slowly, telegraphing his movements, and gently touches her cheek. His hand is rough from years of ranch work, but his touch is softer than silk. For me, he says, you already are. The words hit Clara like lightning, illuminating corners of her heart she'd forgotten existed. For a moment, she allows herself to lean into his touch, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be enough for someone. But the moment is shattered by the sound of voices outside, men calling through the storm. Richard's men, searching for her. Matthew's hand drops from her face, and he moves to the barn window, peering out into the rain. How many? Clara asks, fear making her voice small. 3, maybe 4. They're going door to door. Clara starts to rise, to run again, but Matthew places a gentle hand on her shoulder. Stay, he says. I'll handle this. You don't understand. Richard will destroy you for helping me. He's done it before to others who showed me kindness. Matthew looks at her with those storm-grey eyes, and she sees something that makes her breath catch. Not fear, not doubt, but determination. Let him try, Matthew says. He moves through the barn, extinguishing lanterns, creating pockets of shadow where Clara can hide. Then he settles himself near the door, his hand resting on what Clara now realizes is a shotgun. Matthew, she whispers, you don't even know me. Why would you risk this? He turns to look at her, and in the darkness, his eyes seem to glow. Because, he says simply, everyone deserves someone willing to stand between them and the storm. The voices outside grow closer, and Clara presses herself deeper into the shadows, her heart pounding so loud she's sure the whole town can hear it. She watches Matthew, this giant of a man who appeared in her darkest hour like an answer to prayers she'd stopped believing would be heard. She doesn't know yet that Matthew Kane carries his own wounds, that he lost his family to raiders 5 years ago and has been living with guilt ever since. She doesn't know that helping her is as much about his own redemption as it is about her salvation. All she knows is that for the first time in years, someone looked at her and saw worth. Someone heard her confession of inadequacy and answered with acceptance. Someone powerful enough to protect her chose to use that power on her behalf. The barn doors shake as someone pounds on them from outside. "Open up!" a voice shouts through the storm. "We're looking for someone!" Matthew rises to his full height, and even Clara, who's seen her share of dangerous men, feels a chill at the sight. There's something elemental about him, something that speaks of violence held in check but ready to be unleashed. He opens the door just wide enough to step outside, his bulk filling the doorway and blocking any view of the barn's interior. "Something I can help you gentlemen with?" Matthew asks, his voice carrying clearly through the rain. Clara can't see what's happening, but she can hear conversation, can feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity. "We're looking for a woman," one of the men says. "About 30, auburn hair, green eyes, goes by Clara Whitmore. Her husband's worried sick about her." "Haven't seen anyone matching that description," Matthew replies. "Been alone in my barn all evening, waiting for this storm to pass." "You sure about that? Because we heard someone might be harboring a fugitive, and Mr. Whitmore, well, he doesn't take kindly to folks who interfere with family matters." Clara holds her breath, waiting for Matthew to change his mind, to point them toward her hiding place. It would be the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. "I'm sure," Matthew says, and Clara feels tears of relief stinging her eyes. "And I'd suggest you gentlemen get out of this storm before lightning decides to make your acquaintance." There's a long pause, filled only by the sound of rain and distant thunder. Finally, one of the men speaks again. "Matthew Kane, isn't it? We know who you are, know what you did during the war, know why you came to Sage Creek." Clara hears the threat in the words, the implication that Matthew's past makes him vulnerable to pressure. "Then you know," Matthew says, his voice dropping to a dangerous low, "that I'm not a man who scares easily." "Maybe not," the man replies, "but every man has something he values, something that can be taken away. You'd do well to remember that." The voices fade as the men move away, but Clara knows this isn't over. Richard's men will be back, with more questions and fewer manners. The net is tightening, and she's dragged Matthew into it. When he steps back into the barn, shaking rain from his coat, Clara is already on her feet. "I have to go," she says. "I can't let you get hurt because of me." "Where will you go? The storm's not letting up, and those men will be watching the roads." "I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere that's not here." Matthew studies her face in the dim light, and Clara sees him making a decision that will change both their lives forever. "No," he says. "You'll stay here tonight. In the morning, when the storm passes, we'll figure out what comes next." "Matthew, you don't understand what you're risking." "I understand perfectly." He moves closer, and Clara doesn't flinch away this time. "I understand that you're running from a man who hurt you. I understand that you're scared and alone and convinced you don't deserve help. And I understand that for the first time in 5 years, I have a chance to do something right." Clara searches his face, looking for the crack that will reveal this kindness to be false. But all she sees is sincerity and something else, something that looks like hope. "Why?" she whispers. "Why are you doing this?" Matthew is quiet for so long that Clara thinks he won't answer. When he finally speaks, his voice is rough with old pain. Because 5 years ago, I wasn't there when my family needed me. Couldn't protect them when raiders came. And every day since I've lived with the knowledge that I failed them. He looks directly into her eyes. I can't fail you too. Clara feels something breaking open in her chest, something that's been locked away for years. It's terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected. Matthew, she says, and his name feels like a prayer on her lips. Clara, he responds, and somehow he makes her own name sound like something precious. Outside, the storm rages on, but inside the barn, 2 broken souls have found something they'd given up hoping for. Not healing, exactly, but the possibility of it. Not love, not yet, but the seed of it taking root in the most unlikely soil. Clara doesn't know that this moment will be the brightest in a story destined for darkness. She doesn't know that love found can be love lost, that hearts opened can be hearts broken beyond repair. All she knows is that someone looked at her and said she was enough. And for now, in this barn with rain drumming on the roof and a gentle giant standing guard, that knowledge is everything. Wait a second, subscribe now, because tomorrow I'll deliver something unique, designed just for you. The next morning dawns clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Clara wakes in the loft of Matthew's barn, wrapped in blankets that smell like hay and leather and something indefinably masculine. For a moment, she forgets where she is, forgets why she's here. Then memory rushes back, and with it, the realization that she's slept more peacefully than she has in years. Matthew is already awake, tending to his horses in the stalls below. Clara watches him work, marveling at how gentle his massive hands are with the animals. He speaks to them in low, soothing tones, and they respond to him with the trust that only comes from consistent kindness. "Morning," he calls up when he notices her watching. "There's coffee if you want it." Clara climbs down from the loft, acutely aware of how she must look after sleeping in her clothes. But when Matthew hands her a tin cup of coffee, his eyes hold no judgment, only the same gentle kindness she saw last night. "Thank you," she says, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, "for everything. You don't need to thank me for doing what's right." They stand in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking coffee and listening to the horses move restlessly in their stalls. But Clara knows this peace can't last. Already she can hear the sounds of Sage Creek waking up, and with the new day will come new dangers. "I should go," she says finally. "Put distance between us before Richard realizes I'm still in town." "Where will you go?" Clara stares into her coffee, seeing no answers in its dark surface. "I don't know. Maybe north, toward Canada. Maybe west, to one of the mining towns where a woman can disappear. You'll need supplies, money. I have a little." She touches the small bag hidden in her dress, containing the few coins she'd managed to save without Richard knowing. It's not much, barely enough for a week's food and lodging. Matthew studies her face, and she can see him making calculations, weighing options. "There's another way," he says carefully. "You could stay here, work for me. I need help with the ranch, and you'd be under my protection." Clara's heart leaps at the suggestion, but reality quickly crushes the hope. Richard would never allow it. He'd find a way to force me back, or he'd destroy you for harboring his property. "You're not his property. The law says a woman can leave her husband. The law and Richard Whitmore don't always agree, and in this territory, Richard's word carries more weight than any legal document." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of approaching horses drifts through the morning air. Matthew moves to the window, and Clara sees his jaw tighten. "Sheriff Morton," he says, "and he's not alone." Clara's blood turns to ice. Sheriff Morton is Richard's man through and through, bought and paid for years ago. If he's here, it's because Richard has decided to stop playing games. "Hide," Matthew says, but Clara shakes her head. "There's no point. If they're here with an official warrant, they'll search every inch of this place. And if they find me hiding, it'll just make things worse for you. The horses stop outside the barn, and Clara hears the creak of leather as men dismount. Matthew positions himself between Clara and the door, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Sheriff Morton enters first, a thin man with cold eyes and a badge that's lost whatever shine it once had. Behind him come two of Richard's men, the same. Ones who searched for Clara in the storm. "Morning, Kane," Morton says, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "Fine day after that storm, isn't it?" "Sheriff," Matthew replies neutrally. "What can I do for you?" "Well, we're still looking for Clara Whitmore. Her husband's filed a complaint. Says she stole money when she ran off. That makes her a thief as well as a runaway wife." Clara feels the familiar burn of rage at Richard's tactics. He's always been clever about making himself the victim, about twisting truth until his sins become other people's crimes. "I haven't stolen anything," Clara says, stepping out from behind Matthew. "The money I have, I saved from household allowances over months. It's mine by right." Morton's eyes fix on her with the satisfaction of a hunter spotting prey. "Well now, there you are. We've been looking all over for you, ma'am. Your husband's been worried sick." "My ex-husband," Clara corrects. "We're divorced." "Funny thing about that," Morton says, pulling a folded paper from his vest. "Seems there was a problem with the paperwork. Judge says the divorce was never properly filed. Legally speaking, you're still Mrs. Richard Whitmore." The words hit Clara like physical blows. She'd paid a lawyer in Denver to handle the divorce, had received papers that seemed official. But Richard's reach is long, and his pockets deep. Of course, he'd found a way to undo what she'd thought was her freedom. "Even if that's true," Matthew says, his voice dangerously quiet, "a man can't force his wife to return to him." "Can't he?" Morton's smile is sharp as a blade. "When that wife has stolen his property and fled across state lines? When she's been consorting with known criminals?" "What criminals?" Clara asks, though she has a sinking feeling she knows where this is heading. Morton's gaze shifts to Matthew. "Matthew Kane here is wanted for questioning in connection with a series of cattle thefts. Seems someone's been rustling stock from ranches owned by upstanding citizens. Someone with military training who knows how to plan and execute raids." Clara feels the ground shifting beneath her feet. The charges are obviously false, a trap designed to give Richard leverage over Matthew. But in a territory where Richard Whitmore's word is law, false charges can be just as dangerous as real ones. "That's a lie," Clara says fiercely. "Matthew hasn't stolen anything." "Maybe not," Morton concedes, "but appearances matter. And it appears that a known criminal is harboring a fugitive wife. That's conspiracy, at the very least." Matthew steps forward, and Clara can feel the violence radiating from him, like heat from a forge. "Sheriff, I think it's time you and your friends moved along." "Can't do that, Kane. I've got warrants to serve." Morton signals to his men, who spread out to flank Matthew. "Clara Whitmore, you're under arrest for theft. Matthew Kane, you're under arrest for harboring a fugitive and suspicion of cattle rustling." "No," Clara says, moving to stand beside Matthew. "I won't let you destroy him because of me." But even as she speaks, Clara knows they're trapped. Richard has played this perfectly, using the law as a weapon while keeping his own hands clean. In an hour, she'll be back under his control, and Matthew will be in jail on trumped-up charges that could see him hanged. Unless they fight. Clara can see the same realization dawning in Matthew's eyes. He's calculating odds, measuring distances, preparing for violence he doesn't want but may not be able to avoid. "Sheriff," Matthew says quietly, "I'm asking you nicely to leave my property. Don't make me ask less nicely." Morton's hand moves to his gun. "That sounds like a threat, Kane. It's a promise." For a moment, the barn is silent except for the sound of breathing and the restless movement of horses. Clara can feel the tension building like pressure in a kettle. ready to explode into violence that will solve nothing and hurt everyone. Then, salvation arrives in an unexpected form. "Sheriff Morton!" The voice belongs to Reverend Williams, Sage Creek's elderly pastor. He appears in the barn doorway, slightly out of breath from hurrying. "I was hoping I might find you here." Morton turns, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Reverend, this is official business." "Oh, I'm sure it is, but I'm afraid there's been a terrible mistake." The old man moves into the barn, his presence somehow diffusing the tension. "You see, I've just received a telegram from Denver, from Judge Harrison's office, actually." Clara's heart leaps. Judge Harrison is the man who supposedly invalidated her divorce. "What kind of telegram?" Morton asks suspiciously. "Well, it seems there was some confusion about Mrs. Whitmore's legal status. The divorce papers were properly filed after all. The clerk who reported otherwise has been dismissed for falsifying records. Apparently, he was being paid to alter documents." Morton's face goes pale. "That's impossible." "I'm afraid not, Judge. Harrison is quite upset about the whole affair. He's launching an investigation into who might have bribed his clerk to commit such fraud." The Reverend's eyes fix on Morton with unusual steel. "I imagine he'll be very interested to know who filed the complaint that led to this misunderstanding." Clara realizes what's happening. Someone, maybe several someones in Sage Creek, has decided they've had enough of Richard Whitmore's manipulation of the legal system. The Reverend's telegram might be real, or it might be the town's way of pushing back against corruption. Either way, it's given them an opening. "Even if that's true," Morton says, but his voice lacks conviction now, "there's still the matter of the cattle rustling." "Oh, that," Reverend Williams waves dismissively. "I'm afraid that's been resolved as well. The real rustlers were caught yesterday trying to sell stolen cattle in Billings. 3 men from the Morrison gang, I believe. Sheriff Johnson up there has them in custody, along with signed confessions. Morton looks like a man watching his house burn down. Without the theft charges or the harboring complaint, he has no legal justification for being here. And with the Reverend as witness, he can't simply manufacture new charges on the spot." "This isn't over," Morton warns, but he's already backing toward the door. "Mr. Whitmore won't be pleased about this interference." "I'm sure he won't," the Reverend agrees pleasantly. "You might want to tell him that the good people of Sage Creek are watching his activities with great interest. We'd hate for any more misunderstandings to occur." After Morton and his men leave, Clara sags against a support beam, the strength leaving her legs. She's free, at least for the moment, but the cost of that freedom is becoming clear. "I'm sorry," she says to both Matthew and the Reverend. "I've brought trouble to your town." "Nonsense," Reverend Williams replies. "The trouble was already here, child. You just helped us see it clearly." Matthew nods agreement. "Some fights are worth having. Some stands are worth taking." Clara looks at these 2 men, so different but united in their willingness to protect her, and feels something she hasn't experienced in years. She feels valued. She feels like someone worth fighting for, but she also knows Richard won't give up easily. This was just the first skirmish in a war that's far from over. "What happens now?" she asks. "Now," Matthew says, "you stay here where I can protect you. We'll face whatever comes next together. And if Richard comes with more men, better lies, bigger bribes?" Matthew's eyes go hard as flint. "Then we'll remind him that some things can't be bought or bullied. Some people won't be moved." Clara wants to believe him, wants to trust in the strength she sees in his shoulders and the determination in his voice. But she knows Richard's capacity for cruelty, knows how he destroys anyone who stands against him. As the Reverend takes his leave and Matthew returns to his work, Clara stands in the doorway of the barn, looking out at the town of Sage Creek. It's a small place, dusty and unremarkable, populated by people trying to build lives in harsh country, but for the first time in years, it feels like home. Not because of the buildings or the landscape, but because of the people who've chosen to stand with her against the storm. She doesn't know that this moment of hope is the high point of her story. She doesn't know that love found can become love lost. That sanctuary can become a trap, that sometimes the very people who try to save us become victims of our salvation. All she knows is that Matthew Kane looked at her and said she was enough. And for now, surrounded by people willing to fight for her freedom, that knowledge gives her the strength to believe in tomorrow. But peace, Clara learns, is as fragile as morning frost in this harsh country. 3 days pass. In something approaching happiness, she works alongside Matthew, tending his cattle, mending fences, sharing meals at a table that no longer feels empty. For brief, shining moments, she allows herself to imagine this could last, that love might triumph over the forces arrayed against them. Then Matthew shatters everything with 7 words. "There's something you need to know, Clara." They're sitting by the fire after supper, the comfortable silence of people who found peace in each other's company. But something in Matthew's tone makes Clara look up from her mending, makes her hands go still. "What is it?" she asks, though part of her doesn't want to know. Part of her wants to stay in this moment of warmth and safety before whatever Matthew has to tell her changes everything. Matthew stares into the flames, his massive hands clenched into fists. When he speaks, his voice is rough with old pain and fresh shame. 5 years ago, during the last of the range wars, I was riding with a group of ranchers trying to protect our land from raiders. We'd been hit 3 times in 2 weeks, lost cattle and horses, and we were angry, desperate. Clara sits down, her sewing, giving him her full attention. She can see this is costing him, can see the weight of whatever he's about to confess. We got word that a group of raiders was camped in Broken Arrow Canyon, planning another raid. So we rode out to stop them. It was supposed to be a warning, maybe run them off our territory. Matthew's voice drops to barely above a whisper. But when we got there, when we saw them laughing around their fire, saw them dividing up our stolen cattle, something broke in me. I thought about my family, about how these men were threatening everything I'd built. Clara feels ice forming in her stomach because she knows what's coming. She knows this story can only end one way. "I shot first," Matthew continues, "put a bullet in their leader before anyone even had a chance to surrender. And once the shooting started, it didn't stop until they were all dead." "All of them?" Clara whispers. "All of them. 6 men gunned down in cold blood." Matthew finally looks at her, and Clara sees the depth of his guilt, the wound that's never healed. One of them was just a kid, maybe 17. Another was an old man who probably couldn't have hurt anyone if he'd tried. Clara wants to reach out to him, wants to offer comfort, but she's paralyzed by a horrible suspicion that's beginning to form in her mind. "Matthew," she says carefully, "what were their names? The men you killed?" "I don't know all of them, but the leader, the one I shot first, his name was Thomas Whitmore." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She stumbles backward, knocking over her chair, staring at Matthew as if seeing him for the first time. "Thomas Whitmore," she repeats, "Richard's brother. Wait a second. Subscribe now, because tomorrow I'll deliver something unique, designed just for you." Matthew nods, his face crumbling with the weight of his confession. "I didn't know. Not until I heard your married name, until I started putting pieces together. Thomas Whitmore was Richard's younger brother." Clara's mind reels. Thomas, the black sheep of the Whitmore family, the brother Richard always claimed had been murdered by savage criminals. The brother whose death Richard had used to justify his harsh treatment of anyone he deemed inferior or threatening. "You killed Richard's brother," Clara says, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. I killed a raider who was stealing cattle and terrorizing families. Matthew corrects. I didn't know who he was, didn't know he had family who would mourn him. It doesn't matter what you knew, Clara explodes, her voice breaking with anguish. Don't you see? This changes everything. Richard isn't just trying to get his property back, he's trying to avenge his brother's death. Matthew rises, reaching for her, but Clara backs away. All this time, I thought I was the reason you were in danger, she continues. I thought Richard was after you because of me. But it's the other way around, isn't it? He's using me to get to you. He's using our whatever this is between us as a weapon against the man who killed Thomas. Clara, please. No! She's crying now, tears of rage and heartbreak streaming down her face. Do you have any idea what this means? What Richard will do when he realizes I've fallen in love with the man who murdered his brother? The words hang in the air between them, raw and terrible. It's the first time either of them has spoken the word love aloud, and it's tainted now with blood and betrayal. You don't understand, Matthew says desperately. Thomas and his men had killed families, Clara. They'd burned out homesteaders, murdered children. I didn't hunt them down for sport. I was trying to protect innocent people. It doesn't matter, Clara screams. True or not, justified or not, you killed Richard's brother. And now Richard knows exactly how to destroy us both. As if summoned by her words, the sound of many horses reaches them from outside. Clara moves to the window and feels her blood turn to ice. At least 20 riders surround the ranch house, many carrying torches that turn the night into a hellscape of dancing shadows. At their head sits Richard Whitmore himself, tall and imposing on his black stallion. Even at distance, Clara can see the satisfaction on his face. He's finally sprung his trap, and they've walked right into it. Matthew Kane, Richard's voice, booms across the yard. I know you're in there, and I know you have my wife. Ex-wife, Clara mutters, but the correction feels hollow now. Come out, both of you, Richard continues. Let's settle this like civilized people. Matthew moves to the window beside Clara, and she can see him taking inventory of the situation. 20 armed men against one, with no escape routes and no help coming. The odds are impossible. I can end this, Clara says quietly. I can go. To him, tell him I was your prisoner, that you never touched me. No. Matthew's voice is iron. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for my sins. Your sins? Clara laughs bitterly. These aren't your sins anymore, Matthew. They're ours. The moment I chose to love you, I became complicit in Thomas Whitmore's death. You weren't even there. You had nothing to do with what happened 5 years ago. But I have everything to do with what happens tonight. Clara moves toward the door, but Matthew catches her arm. Don't, he pleads. Please, Clara, we can fight this. We can find another way. Clara looks into his storm-grey eyes, these eyes that have shown her such gentleness, such love. She thinks of all the things they'll never have now, the quiet mornings, the shared meals, the possibility of a life built on something other than violence and revenge. There is no other way, she says softly. There never was. From the moment I walked into your barn, we were doomed. I just didn't know it yet. Outside, Richard's voice rises again. You have 1 minute, Kane, then we come in after you. Clara pulls free from Matthew's grasp and heads for the door, but before she can reach it, it explodes inward in a shower of splinters. Men pour through the opening, guns drawn, faces hard with righteous anger. Richard Whitmore follows them in, and Clara sees her former husband clearly for the first time in months. He's aged since she left him, gained weight and lines around his eyes, but he's still imposing, still radiating the kind of power that comes from owning everything and everyone in sight. Hello, darling, Richard says to Clara, his voice dripping with false sweetness. Did you miss me? Go to hell, Richard. Richard's smile doesn't waver, but his eyes go cold. Such language. Clearly, your time with this killer has coarsened you. He turns his attention to Matthew, who stands at the center of the room like a mountain that cannot be moved. Matthew Kane, Richard says conversationally, the man who murdered my brother in cold blood. Do you know how long I've been looking for you? Not long enough, Matthew replies. Richard's laugh is sharp as broken glass. Oh, but I have been looking. Ever since I learned that Thomas's killer had settled in Sage Creek, I've been planning this moment, imagining what I'd do to you when I finally had you in my power. And what's your plan, Whitmore? Murder me in front of witnesses? String me up without a trial? Murder? Richard looks genuinely shocked. My dear fellow, I'm not a barbarian. No, I have something much more civilized in mind. He gestures to one of his men, who produces a set of shackles. You're under citizen's arrest for the murder of Thomas Whitmore and 5 other men. You'll be taken to the territorial capital for trial, where a jury of your peers will decide your fate. Clara knows what that means. Richard owns judges and juries just as surely as he owns land and cattle. Matthew will get a trial, but the verdict is already decided. And what about me? Clara asks. Richard's smile returns, warm as a snake's embrace. You, my dear wife, are coming home where you belong. I'm prepared to overlook your temporary madness in exchange for your renewed commitment to our marriage. I'm not your wife anymore. Ah, but you are. It seems there were some irregularities with your divorce papers. Clerical errors, really. Easily corrected once you're back under my protection. Clara realizes the trap is even more sophisticated than she'd thought. Richard will take Matthew away for a sham trial and execution, while she'll be forced to return to a marriage that was never truly ended. They'll be separated, and she'll spend the rest of her life knowing that her love for Matthew led to his death. I won't go with you, she says. Oh, but you will, because if you don't, if you force me to take you by violence, then I'm afraid Mr. Kane might suffer some unfortunate injuries during his arrest. Men can be so clumsy with their prisoners sometimes. The threat is clear. Cooperate or watch Matthew be beaten to death before her eyes. Clara looks at Matthew, sees the same understanding in his face. He wants to fight, wants to go down swinging, rather than submit to Richard's justice, but he also knows that fighting will only ensure Clara suffers for his defiance. There's another option, Matthew says quietly. Richard raises an eyebrow. Oh, trial by combat. Your best man against me. Winner takes all. Richard considers this, clearly intrigued by the possibilities. Interesting, but what do I gain? I already have you both. You have us, but you don't have justice, not real justice. Your brother died in battle, Whitmore. He died fighting. Give me the same chance. Clara can see Richard weighing the offer, can see the appeal it holds for a man who's always prided himself on being civilized, on doing things the proper way. And if you win, Richard asks, Clara and I leave the territory. You never see either of us again. And if you lose, I die, and Clara makes her own choice about her future. It's a terrible bargain, offering Clara freedom at the cost of Matthew's life, but it's the only chance they have, the only way to break free from the trap that's been closing around them. Agreed, Richard says. Dawn, in the town square. My champion against you. As Richard's men file out, leaving only a few guards behind, Clara moves close to Matthew. You can't do this, she whispers. Richard's champion will be a professional gunfighter. You're good, but you're not that good. Matthew touches her face with infinite tenderness. Maybe not, but it's the only way to give you a chance at freedom. What if I don't want freedom without you? Then I'll have to make sure I win. Outside, the torches fade as Richard's men settle in to wait for dawn. Inside the cabin, two lovers hold each other through what may be their last night together, neither speaking of the battle to come, both knowing that by tomorrow's sunset, their story will be over. In a few hours, Matthew Kane will face Richard, Whitmore's champion in single combat. The winner will claim not just victory, but the right to determine Clara's fate. And Clara, watching the man she loves prepare for what may be his final battle, finally understands the full cost of loving someone in a world that offers no sanctuary for the weak, no mercy for the different, and no happy endings for those who dare to love across the lines that powerful men have drawn in blood. Dawn arrives like a judge passing sentence, cold and unforgiving. Clara has not slept, has instead spent the night memorizing Matthew's face, the sound of his breathing, the way his massive hands can be so gentle when they touch her skin. She knows these memories will have to last her a lifetime, however long that lifetime might be. Matthew dresses in silence, checking his gun and settling his hat with the methodical precision of a man who has faced death before. But Clara can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenches when he thinks she's not looking. He's not afraid of dying, she realizes. He's afraid of leaving her alone. "Promise me something," Clara says as they prepare to leave for the town square. "Anything. Promise me that if you fall, Richard's champion proves too fast, that you won't die thinking you failed me. Because you haven't, Matthew. You've given me something I never thought I could have again." "What's that?" "The knowledge that I'm worth loving." Matthew stops what he's doing and looks at her, really looks at her, as if he's trying to burn her image into his memory, just as she's been doing with his. "Clara," he says, "no matter what happens out there, no matter who walks away from that square, you remember this. You are worth everything. You are worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. Don't let anyone ever make you believe otherwise." They walk to the town square hand in hand, neither speaking, both aware that these may be their final moments together. The entire population of Sage Creek has turned out to witness the duel, faces ranging from sympathetic to hostile to simply curious. This is the most excitement the town has seen in years, and Clara hates them all for making a spectacle of her. Heartbreak. Richard waits in the center of the square, resplendent in a black suit that makes him look like an undertaker. Beside him stands his champion, and Clara's heart sinks as she recognizes the man, Jake Murdoch, known throughout the territory as one of the fastest guns alive. He's tall and thin, with pale eyes that never seem to blink and hands that rest, naturally, on the pearl-handled Colts at his hips. This isn't a duel, Clara realizes. It's an execution with legal dressing. "Gentlemen," Richard calls out, his voice carrying clearly across the square, "we are gathered here to witness a trial by combat, sanctioned by territorial law and overseen by Sheriff Morton. The rules are simple. Single combat pistols, winner determined by death or surrender." Matthew steps forward, and even facing impossible odds, he looks magnificent. Clara sees several women in the crowd catch their breath at the sight of him, this gentle giant who has become her whole world. "Any last words, Kane?" Richard asks with mock solemnity. Matthew looks back at Clara, and she sees everything in his eyes. Love, regret, determination, and a kind of peace that comes from accepting whatever fate awaits. "I love you, Clara Whitmore," he says, loud enough for the entire town to hear. "Whatever happens here, never forget that you are enough. You have always been enough." The words hit Clara like physical blows. She wants to run to him, to throw herself between him and Murdoch's guns, but she knows it would only make things worse. All she can do is stand and watch and pray to a God who seems to have forgotten that good people exist. Sheriff Morton raises his hand and the square falls silent. "Gentlemen, take your positions." Matthew and Murdoch walk to opposite ends of the square, their boots echoing on the hard-packed earth. Clara can see the confidence in Murdoch's stride, the casual way he adjusts his gun belt. This is routine for him, just another day's work. But Matthew moves with purpose, with dignity, and Clara realizes he's not planning to lose. Against all odds, facing the fastest gun in the territory, Matthew Kane believes he can win. The thought gives her hope and terror in equal measure. "On my count," Morton calls out. "1." Clara holds her breath, her hands clench so tightly, her nails draw blood from her palms. 2. Matthew's hand hovers over his gun, his entire body coiled like a spring. Across from him, Murdoch looks almost bored, as if he's already spent the money Richard will pay him for this kill. 3. Both men draw with lightning speed, but Murdoch is faster. His guns clear leather a split second before Matthew's, and Clara watches in horror as smoke blooms from the gunfighter's weapons. But Matthew doesn't fall. Instead, he takes a step forward, his own gun speaking twice in rapid succession. Murdoch staggers backward, looking down in surprise at the spreading red stain on his chest. His guns slip from nerveless fingers, and he collapses to the dusty ground of the square. For a moment, the entire town is silent. Then, someone starts, clapping, and the sound spreads through the crowd like wildfire. They're cheering for Matthew, Clara realizes, cheering for the underdog who faced impossible odds and somehow prevailed. But Richard's face is a mask of rage, and Clara knows this isn't over. Her former husband has lost his champion, lost his legal justification for holding them, but men like Richard don't accept defeat gracefully. "Impressive," Richard says, his voice carrying clearly across the square, "but I'm afraid this changes nothing." "The hell it doesn't," Matthew replies, holstering his gun. "We had an agreement, Whitmore. Your man lost. Clara and I are free to go." "Ah, but you see, there's been a slight complication." Richard signals to someone in the crowd, and Clara's blood turns to ice as she sees more of his men emerging from buildings around the square. They must have been waiting, ready to act, regardless of the duel's outcome. Wait a second. Subscribe now, because tomorrow I'll deliver something unique, designed just for you. "You may have killed my champion," Richard continues, "but you're still a murderer, and I'm still a citizen with the right to make an arrest." The trap snaps, shut with almost audible finality. The duel was never meant to determine their fate, Clara realizes. It was just theater, a way for Richard to maintain his civilized facade while getting what he wanted. But she's underestimated the people of Sage Creek. "That's enough, Whitmore." Reverend Williams steps forward, followed by half a dozen other townspeople. "You've had your satisfaction. Let them go. This is none of your business, preacher." "It became my business when you turned our town square into a circus," the Reverend replies firmly. "And it became every decent person's business when you started treating the law like your personal plaything." Clara sees other faces in the crowd, people she's come to know during her brief time in Sage Creek. The blacksmith who shod Matthew's horses, the widow who ran the boarding house, the young doctor who'd treated her scraped hands without asking questions about how she'd gotten them. They're not all heroes, these people, but they're tired of being pushed around by men like Richard Whitmore, tired of watching power corrupt justice, tired of standing by while good people suffer. "Stand aside," Richard orders, but his voice lacks its usual authority. He can see the mood of the crowd, can feel the tide turning against him. That's when Clara makes her choice. She steps forward, placing herself between Matthew and Richard's. "Guns! No more!" she says, her voice carrying clearly across the square. "I won't let you hurt him." "Clara, don't!" Matthew starts, but she cuts him off with a look. "I spent years letting you control me, Richard," she continues, addressing her former husband directly. "Years believing I deserved the pain you gave me. But I know better now. Matthew taught me better." Richard's face contorts with rage. "You belong to me. You're my wife. I belong to myself," Clara replies with quiet dignity, "and I choose Matthew Kane." It's a declaration of war, and Richard responds as she knew he would. His hand moves to his gun, murder blazing in his eyes. But Clara is ready for him. She spent weeks watching Matthew move, learning the rhythm of violence, understanding the split-second timing that separates the quick from the dead. Richard's gun clears leather just as Clara draws the small pistol she's kept hidden in her dress. They fire simultaneously, the reports echoing off the buildings around the square. Clara feels the bullet tear through her chest, feels her legs give way beneath her, but she sees Richard stumble backward, sees the shock and pain on his face. As her own bullet finds its mark, as she falls, strong arms catch her, Matthew kneeling beside her in the dust, his storm-grey eyes filled with anguish. "Clara, no," he whispers. "Stay with me." She tries to speak, tries to tell him that it's all right, that she's not afraid, but the words won't come, and she can taste blood in her mouth. Around them, chaos erupts as Richard's men realize their leader is dying, as the townspeople surge forward to protect Matthew and Clara from any retaliation. But Clara barely notices. Her world has narrowed to Matthew's face, to the love and desperation she sees there. "I need to tell you something," she manages to whisper, using what may be her last breath. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "No, listen." Clara reaches up with trembling fingers to touch his cheek. "I was wrong before, about not being enough." "Clara, I was enough," she continues, her voice growing fainter. "For you, I was always enough, and for me, that's everything." Matthew's tears fall like rain on her face, and Clara wants to comfort him, wants to tell him that he's given her the greatest gift imaginable. He's shown her that she has value, that she's worthy of love, that her life has meaning beyond the pain others have inflicted on her. "Matthew," she whispers, "do you know what you gave me?" "What?" "You gave me myself back. You made me whole. Again." The words cost her everything she has left, but they're worth it to see understanding dawn in his eyes. She's not just dying, she realizes. She's completing something that began the moment she stumbled into his barn, seeking shelter from the storm. She came to him broken, convinced she was worthless. She's leaving him whole, certain of her own value. It's not the ending she would have chosen, but it's an ending with meaning, with purpose, with love. "I love you," Matthew says, his voice breaking. "Don't leave without subscribing, because tomorrow you will discover something special that has been prepared for you." "I know," Clara replies, managing one last smile. "I know." The world fades around the edges, but Clara's last sight is Matthew's face, and her last thought is a prayer of gratitude. She came seeking shelter and found love. She came believing she was nothing and learned she was everything. In the end, that knowledge is enough. She is enough. And as her eyes close for the final time, Clara Whitmore dies knowing she was loved, knowing she mattered, knowing that for one shining moment in this hard world, she had been exactly what someone needed her to be. The square falls silent except for Matthew's broken sobs and the sound of wind through the buildings. Richard Whitmore lies dead 20 feet away, his grand plans dying with him. His men, leaderless and outnumbered, melt away like shadows at dawn. Justice has been served, but at a price that makes victory taste like ashes in the mouth. Matthew. Kane will bury Clara Whitmore under an oak tree outside of town. Will speak words over her grave that only he will ever hear. He'll leave Sage Creek the next morning, riding toward a horizon that holds nothing but emptiness, carrying with him the memory of a woman who taught him that love can bloom even in the hardest soil. And in years to come, when old-timers tell stories around campfires, they'll speak of the giant cowboy and the woman who loved him, of a love that burned bright and brief as a shooting star, of two souls who found each other in the darkness and held on until the very end. Because sometimes, in this hard world, love doesn't conquer all. Sometimes it just illuminates what matters most, that we are all enough, exactly as we are, for the people meant to love us. And sometimes that knowledge is the only victory that truly counts. Now, before I bring this story to its close, I need to ask you something that's been weighing on my heart throughout Clara and Matthew's journey. In all the moments we've shared with these two broken souls finding each other, which scene has touched you most deeply? Was it when Clara first whispered, "I'm afraid I'm not enough," and Matthew replied, "For me, you already are"? When Matthew confessed to killing Richard's brother, shattering the foundation of their love? When Clara chose to face Richard's gun rather than let Matthew be taken? Or perhaps that final moment when she died, knowing, finally and completely, that she was worthy of love? I want you to tell me in the comments which part of Clara and Matthew's story reached into your chest and grabbed your heart, because these are the moments that define what it means to love and be loved, to see worth in ourselves and others, to choose courage over safety, even when the cost is everything we hold dear. Don't leave without subscribing, because tomorrow you will discover something special that has been prepared for